I loved my father's hands. As a child, I was fixated on them. And it wasn't that I didn't notice his eyes and his smile, but his hands. It was always his hands. And they were warm and they were big and they were strong for me as a child. And I would sit in synagogue. I would play with the fringes of his talit. Did anybody play with the fringes of the talit of their father? And I would watch his hands, and he had a way of doing something with his finger. His index finger would roll over the thumb. If he was holding my hand, he'd do the same thing to my hand. And then one day, I didn't even notice. I was doing the same thing. Is it hereditary? I don't know. Or is it in some way I learned this from watching his hands? And one day, when Dave and I were growing up, we lived in Trumbull, Connecticut, and we had a driveway leading to the garage, and on the garage we had a basketball hoop. And every now and then, our father would come out and play basketball with us. He wasn't gentle when he played sports. He only knew how to, he was always in fourth gear. And the fact that he was playing against his sons, both of whom were, I don't know, younger, smaller, didn't matter. Banging around. And one time I pushed him. I didn't mean to push him, but I pushed him. And he put his hand through a glass plate of the garage door. And he cut himself pretty badly. And he was a dentist at the time. He needed that hand. And I remember we had a family member there, and they rush him to the hospital. And I go with him. And all I remember the guy in the car saying, "Don't get blood on my new car." And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't have the right words, what I would say now about it. What up? And we got there, and we ended up in an emergency room, and my father's getting stitches. And it's so much more painful for me than for him. But I remember feeling terrible. And he kept telling me, "This isn't your fault. It's not your fault. We were just playing basketball." The picture, symbol this year, see, that reminds me of my father's hand. That picture is a midrash. That's a visual midrash. Any one of us can look at that picture, and we can see a story in that picture. Somebody said to me, "Oh, I know, that's your hand with saritz on top of it." Is it my hand? Did you take the picture? By the way, I will never tell. It's a midrash. And, I believe if we had a creative writing session, and every one of us was given a pad, and you had 30 minutes to write a story that ends up with that picture, we get marvelous and different stories. That's what midrash is. You see a piece of Torah text, and you tell a different story. And you tell a different story each year. Because when you come to the picture, we're different. And so we see it differently. But it seems like there is one overarching message that comes from that symbol this year. There's something very lovely about that. There's something very kind about it. It has the feel of loving kindness, what the tradition calls chesed. And for me, there's something about it that is very comforting. Someone is holding someone else's hand and saying, in essence, I'm with you. I'm right here. And everything's going to be okay. Chesed, which is, as you know, the melody that Sarit and Dar just did, and the line from Pirkei Avot, one of the classic lines in the entire Talmud, comes from the Mishnah, Pirkei Avot. The world omeid stands. And stands, you understand the context, it literally means stands. It doesn't mean stand when you understand the sense of the rabbinic literature. It means it is held up. It is sustained by three qualities. And one of those qualities is gmilut chasadim. Chesed, acts of loving kindness. And the act here that I take from it, and I hope many of you too, is the love is expressed as a way of comfort. There is a comfort element where the top hand is there on the low hand as a means of comfort. And if you see, by the way, if you can see from where you are, the hand that's being comforted in some way is grasping onto a finger of the top hand. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone. Everyone wants to be loved, wants to be appreciated, wants to be seen, wants to be recognized as important and having value, and to be loved. Everybody. And before there was a Sophocles and an Aeschylus, and before there was a Shakespeare, and before there was a Freud, the Jewish tradition was talking about the complexity of human relationships and what human beings need from others to feel complete, validated. There's so much extraordinary poetry outside the Jewish tradition that speaks to this theme. But for me, it's the poetry in the Jewish tradition that we should be aware of. The Torah begins, we did this a couple of years ago. The Torah begins with, it is not good for a human being to be alone. As wonderful as this world is, the first negative statement made about the creation of the world is, it's not good for a person to be alone. And that people become human and are able to make miracles in lives in relationship with people they love and people who care about them. And every now and then you hear somebody say, you know, you should be strong enough to feel good about yourself regardless of how other people feel about you. That's not the Jewish tradition's understanding. Yes, by the way, every one of us needs to feel good about him or herself. The line is, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. If I am not for myself, who will be? The tradition always says, it starts with how you feel about yourself. And we're encouraged to really, yes, love ourselves. Love ourselves. But the tradition doesn't pretend that the way we feel about ourselves is not the product of how others view us, how others affirm who we are, how others tell us that we're good, and that what we've done is good, and that what we're capable of is good, and that we are loved. A person who is told over and over, with any sense of sincerity, they are loved, feels loved. And words matter. There was once a generation, we all know this. Either it happened to us or we know people who it happened to, where parents never said to their children, I love you. And their answer was, they knew I loved them. Everything I did said I love them. And that's not untrue either. There is truth there, as truth comes in many forms. But this generation knows how important it is for a child to hear, I love you. How important it is for a husband and wife to hear from each other, I adore you. How important it is for a brother and a brother and a brother and a sister and a sister and a sister to say whenever they can, I love you. And by the way, it's said in different ways. I love you. Love you. And then every now and then, I love you. Love is huge. And love is comforting. And love is what chesed and gmilut chasadim is trying to convey. One isn't lovely in some ethereal sense. One is trying to be as lovely a person as possible so that the other person walks away feeling comfort and strength and worthiness and of being loved. And that's what chesed is in general in the Jewish tradition. And then we come to tonight. What is it? What's the special wrinkle of chesed on Kol Nidre Eve? This most sacred moment in the Jewish year. And the rabbis have an answer. The rabbis say, the chesed of Kol Nidre is forgiving. The theme of the Day of Atonement, and that is what this is. We are starting a 24-hour journey of atonement. And those who break the word up aren't wrong. It's at one meant. At one with whom? At one with one's inner self, at one with the people closest to us, at one with our community as a whole. And then those who say, at one with the divine in this universe. However one uses the word God, one thing can be said. Human beings have a profound sensitivity to the divine in this universe that is experienced when one does something lovely for another human being. And in that moment of loveliness, one feels as if one is in total harmony with the ground of existence, with the Yud He Vav He of life. Long before Sophocles, long before Shakespeare, long before Freud, Jews were struggling with what does it mean to be loved and to love. And there's Genesis, it is not good for man to be alone. There's Leviticus, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And there's Psalm 23. Psalm 23 is the most well-known psalm in the entire Bible. It often goes by, the Lord is my shepherd. We do it, by the way, once a year. We do it on Kol Nidre Eve. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall want. And the key line is, yea, though do you remember this? If I walk, as I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, I will what? Fear no evil. Very good. For thou art with me. By the way, you understand the rabbis are going to do a drash on this. We tend to just read it. The rabbis have a drash. If you remember the midrash that says, where can you find God? Where do you find God? And the rabbis answer, look at the footprints of righteous people. Where righteous people have walked, that's where you see God. In other words, anytime there's a moment when people do chesed, gmilut chasadim, for each other, when they visit the sick, comfort the mourner, bury the dead, care for the orphan, the widow, and the stranger, who will not tolerate poverty or hunger, and who understand that a Jewish community's first responsibility is to care for the health of the people in their community. It is so interesting to me that according to Maimonides, there must be universal health care. It is a principle of Judaism. And the Jewish tradition sets it up this way. How do you find God? Look at what righteous people do. So when it says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will feel no evil, for you are with me. The you is us. The midrash is, the you is human beings. It's the human beings who stand with people who are in the valley and the shadow of whatever the pain of life is. It's people who transcend that moment in the valley. It's us doing chesed, gmilut chasadim. It's that moment that is the transcending moment referred to in Psalm 23. And the psalm goes on. For thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. It's all about comfort. This symbol could be a symbol for somebody who wants to say, I'll depict Psalm 23 for you. Bam. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. My cup runneth over. Surely, let's see if you remember this now. Surely, something and something will follow me all the days of my life. What is it? Goodness and mercy shall follow me all. I've said to you often, part of the problem of doing things in translation is that the translator has the right to do his own midrash. It's always better to read the text in the original language. So lo and behold, if you read Psalm 23 in Hebrew, it doesn't say mercy. It says tov, goodness, the chesed. Tov v'chesed, goodness and loving kindness, not mercy. Loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life. When we are sustained by other people, goodness and loving kindness is experienced by both the person receiving and the person doing. It's an extraordinary insight of the Jewish tradition. Goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life. And then to finish it, and I will dwell the house of the Lord forever. They don't mean, it's all symbolism here. It's poetry. It's not just a house where God lives. It means if we are all of this, then we dwell in harmony with the essence of the divine in the universe. People who are looking for ways to do that end up in an aura, not from on high, created from within us, that transports all of us to a higher level of reality and experience, that we dwell in harmony with the divine forever. And then we get to what the rabbis do with chesed on Kol Nidre and Yom Kippur. If it's about forgiving, and the tradition tells us, it is more important to be forgiving on Yom Kippur than to receive forgiveness. When I was growing up, it was all about, you got to go to shul so God can forgive you. Not if you read the rabbis. There is this element of all of us who are sensitive to who we are. No, I don't care how lovely we are. There's always room to be lovelier, except you. And I know it from firsthand experience. I want to be lovely all the time. Then I make mistakes. And the mistakes are not, huge, but they hurt people's feelings. People end up feeling neglected. And one of the things we're asked to do is get better at it, become lovelier. And one of the places it's needed most, the rabbis argue, based on Torah portion after Torah portion after Torah portion, is inside families. There is so much alienation and estrangement and bitterness inside families among people who once loved each other very, very much. There is almost no family for whom, somewhere, somehow, somebody's walking around hurt. Someone feels they've been neglected. Someone feels they were disrespected. There's a rivalry going on. And very often there can be serious breaches where families don't see each other. Children don't see parents for long periods of time. All this, by the way, is reflected in the Torah text. Jacob is away from his family, his mother and father, for 20 years. And it starts with all this nonsense about dressing up and stealing birthrights and blessings. But the Christian says to us, this is Yom Kippur. This is a day of cleansing. And the most important thing we can do, the most loving thing we can do, is find a way to forgive. And I'm not saying it's always easy, because sometimes the hurt is so deep and seems so purposeful that it's hard to just say it doesn't matter. And at other times, one doesn't even remember where the hurt came from, but one has remained apart. It's most tragic when it's with parents and children, and brothers and brothers and brothers and sisters and sisters and sisters, and that's where it's the saddest. But the tradition encourages us to find a way to let go of grudges, especially in and between families. So there's this great Talmudic scholar, Abraham Tversky, who also happens to be a practicing psychiatrist. And he came up with this phrase. It says in the Torah, Leviticus 19, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Immediately before that it says, and you shall not bear a grudge. And Tversky asks, how does the rabbinic tradition understand it means to love one's neighbor as oneself? One of the things it means is one is not permitted to bear a grudge. And to do so, Tversky says, is like letting somebody you don't like live inside you rent-free. Holding on to the anger not only keeps someone we once loved away, it also eats at us. That's the inside of the Jewish tradition. And it's not, let's all say we're sorry and that's the end of it. No, it's supposed to be serious. It's supposed to be able to say to somebody who hurt us, you hurt us. And you're hoping the person says, oh, I'm sorry. Anytime we hear the word, I'm sorry, the Jewish tradition says we are obligated to say that I forgive. Being forgiving is one of the sweetest, gentlest, and most cleansing of human acts possible. And it's meant for Yom Kippur. People who love each other should be with each other. Sometimes it's so complicated. Life is so complicated. And sometimes we look at other families. It looks so idyllic over there. They don't have a problem in the world. But no one knows what's behind the closed door. And the bottom line is, behind every door, there is human tourists. Kol Nidre comes and says, try at least to reduce the enmity, the anger, the feeling that one was neglected or belittled, that a parent loved the other one more, which may have been true, but it's neither child's fault. And part of becoming an adult, the Jewish tradition says, is understanding when it's not anyone's fault. Move on. And there's one last wrinkle to the rabbinic understanding of chesed, and it is pictured in this symbol. The rabbis ask, what's the difference between tzedakah, which comes from the word righteousness, where you go out and you try to help other people, and chesed, and gmilut chasadim? We talked about it for a moment before. One of the differences is tzedakah can be done impersonally. You can put a check in the mail. Chesed, you may not do that. Chesed always requires an intimate personal relationship. Intimate. Where one looks in the eyes of the other individual and cares about them and is giving to them out of a sense of their own humanity. But the rabbis say there's another difference between tzedakah and chesed. Tzedakah can only be given to someone who's alive. Chesed is something people give to people who are living and to parents who no longer walk this earth with us. Chesed transcends time and the grave. And chesed links generations together. And it's very important because very often it is said an adult child winds up resenting a parent even after they have left this world. For something the parent did, for something the parent said, for maybe something that was wholly inappropriate behavior by the parent. And the Jewish tradition says to us, part of what it is to be committed to gmilut chasadim is to extend a loving kindness even to those beyond the grave. That a mother and father do not die when their life ends. A mother and father live as long as there are children who remember their father and mother with love. And what the tradition asks us to do is understand that what we want for ourselves is no less than we should give to our parents. When we were young, and I started with a story about my father and his hand, my father was perfect. My father could do no wrong. If you asked me, do you believe in God? And even then I would say what I say now, I'm not sure. But if one said, what's the image you have of God? It would resemble strikingly my father. That's the home children grew up in. We grew up in homes where our mothers and fathers are gods. They're perfect. And thank heaven that's how we experience them. But life is so complicated and so painful and so wrapped up with illness and disappointment and tragic death that every adult is influenced and fashioned and shaped by his or her own childhood and parents and life that they grew up with in pain and in joy. And as much as we argue that a parent must respect the dignity of a child does not belong to a parent. That's why it says in the ceremony, we guide your life for a little while until that time is done, and then we give back to you what has always been rightfully yours, yourself. To love a child is to love a child's dreams. Children have their own dreams. I'm not talking about 6-year-olds. I'm talking about 20s and 30s and 40-year-olds. Adult children have their dreams. And as Ezekiel Nissim always says, he says it every year, protect me, please, from my secret desire to fashion my children after my own fantasies and illusions. Let my children dance to their music, dissonant though it may be to me. That's the challenge of every serious, loving, gmilut chasadimish parent. We guide the lives of our children for a little while, and then we hope that when that time is done, they make wise choices. But they probably are only people as well. And they'll make their own mistakes and their own challenges. And we only hope for them, by the way, health and happiness. But we ask them to break a glass at the chuppah because we know life will inevitably have its moments of pain. And children must give the exact same right to their parents. We have no right to judge our parents' marriage. We have no right to judge the way husbands and wives, mothers and fathers worked out a life for themselves. And it's no business to judge a parent for their idiosyncrasies. And sometimes the sad thing is they could hurt us. Parents do things that are painful. And the question every child has to ask when the child is an adult, was it on purpose? Almost always it's never on purpose. Parents do the best they can, but they're people too. And the transcending power of Kol Nidre is also reflected in the fact that generations are pictured in the symbol this year. It isn't two equal hands. Each one of us could, again, decide who it was and what was the age of each hand. But one thing is clear. There are generations holding hands together in a moment of gmilut chasadim. And what we want to do this year is to find within ourselves as much of the embrace reflected in that symbol that we can give forgiveness to anyone who walks alongside us and give forgiveness to anyone who is no longer here. By doing so, the tradition says, incidentally, we honor our mother and father. It's why Jews have Yizkor. It's why Jews have Yortzeit candles. We will honor our parents forever. And as long as we honor them, they remain our mommy and our daddy. But they do so in a context where they are respected the same as we want to be respected, as free individuals who do the best they can, and if it's possible, to remember a parent only for good, and to remember or to feel that the nonsense was just nonsense, a product of where they came from, but that their strength and their legacy is the goodness they passed on to us. If we can do that, we not only honor them in some transcendent, divine way, we are cleansed inside as well. And our ability to do gmilut chasadim expands. In one moment we do the threefold chant of Kol Nidre. Each of us here is here because we hope the experience together will enable us to be just a little sweeter, a little lovelier, a little more gmilutish, chasadimish. So when we say the 3 chants tonight, I suggest all of us chant them in the following mood. 1, the first chant is always quiet. The quiet is, we not only have to forgive others, we also have to forgive ourselves. Whatever it is that we feel we have not done well enough, that too, let it go. This is a new year. A new year. But we regret. We begin with regret for all the moments we had where we could have done gmilut chasadim and we didn't. Any such moment we are very sorry for. And then the second chant, which has more strength, we will resolve to forgive wherever it's possible. It's not always possible, but wherever it is possible, we will forgive and wash it away. And that's the second chant, stronger than the first. Regret, resolve, and the third chant is our promise to each other and to ourselves that in this new year we will do everything we possibly can to bring as much chesed and gmilut chasadim to people we love, to our community, to our friends, and to all those who help make our life so beautiful together, and in some transcendent way to a generation that no longer stands physically beside us, but which is with us every single day of our lives. And we all say,
Be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.